Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are happy to have Kevin Crowder visiting with us again to get an update on trends and activities in the downtown based on his data and information. So with that brief or introduction, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Great. Thanks, George. Nice to see you all again. Similar information you've seen in the past. Touch briefly on the real estate market, especially looking at some of the residential, the new residential, and then get into the foot traffic trends. We did, in addition to the downtown, as we've always done last year, if you remember, we also included some comparisons to the Broadwalk and even some of that cross-utilization. So we've updated those as well. Just briefly, I know that Lisa gave you a presentation that was more in depth on downtown tenants and occupancies and stuff last month, but we have seen steady growth in the rents. Rents on retail are about $30 a foot. You'd still have steady leasing activity going. One of the things that we have is that steadiness will help you get some turnover. We'll talk more about that when we get into the foot traffic and some of the hours of operation and some of the other opportunities that you may have in some of the uses that you have downtown. Because one of the other things we'll talk about is the other big conversation last year was about trying to get more daytime traffic and get away from just being more consistent throughout the day rather than heavy on the nighttime. On the office market, steady increases. Again, Hollywood here in the office market, similar to what we're seeing in a lot of places in South Florida, where we're contrary to the national trends with office markets. While our cap rates are going up like other places, which brings value of properties down, the occupancies are still there, the demand is still there, and that's still keeping the rents at the levels they need to be for most of those buildings to be able to operate. And as you can see, you still have leasing activity and the interest in the demand for space in downtown. And it's those office uses that are one of the things that can help with that daytime activity, both drawing customers that may be coming to the offices as well as things that those employers are going to get out and do. And then when we looked at the multifamily market, as you have new product coming online in downtown, as you know, strong demand there. So you'll see on the chart on the left, when a new building opens, your inventory goes up. And on the chart on the bottom right, you'll see when that new building comes online, the vacancies are going to go up temporarily because you've got a bunch of new inventory you've put on the market. So see in the fourth quarter of 2020, you had a building open, vacancy was up to 25%. 4 quarters later, in the fourth quarter of 2021, you'll see that it was back under 5%. So those 4 quarters, those units got absorbed. First quarter of 2022, you had more units come online. Peak in vacancy, but you'll see that just 1 quarter later, you were back down to under 10% in vacancy, and 2 quarters later, you were under 5%. So the time to absorb those units was half the time that it took for the prior building to bring those vacancies down. So that indicates just really strong demand to be living and able to rent and have new product to move into in downtown Hollywood. And you have more coming online, and we expect that demand's going to continue because it's helping you build this great critical mass and just more and more of this place that people want to be. I will tell you, I don't have a chart on the favorite places, but another thing that we saw when we looked at in the foot traffic data, we filtered by what your residents do, and one of the things we look at is what are the leisure activities that they do. And last year, Hollywood Beach is the #1 leisure destination that your residents had, as well as your customers. Number 2 was, I think, the American Airlines Arena and some other things. Last year, it was not on the top 5 even for residents. Number 2 this year, favorite leisure place, was Young Circle Park. And so that activity and people finding things and becoming more participatory, more engaged with the different things that they have in the neighborhood, we're seeing in the trends as those units become more and more occupied. And high occupancy in those buildings. As you can see, most of them, the apartment buildings are over 90% in their occupancy. And you're generally going to see that because rents are going to be adjusted to keep that occupancy up in those buildings. But even in the condominium buildings, we see that as well. Rents, when we looked a couple of days ago, the asking rents in 1818 were about $3.37 a foot. So you're over about the last 5 years, you've gone from a little bit under $2.50 a foot in your rental to now peaking over $3 a foot, especially in the new products. And then on the for sale side, we had seen everywhere in South Florida, we see a drop in active listings during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. The red line is 2023, where we saw this increase returning back towards more of the normal levels of activity that we see in listings, and you see that continuing even stronger so far in 2024. And then what we did is we looked at the 3 new products buildings that that have for sale, Cirque, Hollywood Station, and Radius. And you see an increase in the asking and the median sale prices in those 3 buildings. But more interesting is the per square foot, because the median price is one thing, but you don't know the size of the units that are being sold. But you see that from 2022 to 2024, just those 2 years, a 25% increase in the actual value of the square footage in that product that's for sale. So again, reinforces just that strong demand that you have of people, not just to visit downtown, but to be part of it and living here. And then on to the foot traffic. So in looking at I'm going to start just a couple slides, or maybe it may just be one slide, on the employees, because we also look at employees. And you'd seen getting to a peak of a little more than 8,000 employees in the downtown area right before the pandemic came. And obviously you see that decline over a couple of years as remote work from home, not returning to the office, businesses changing the way they operate or closing or whatever it may be. But we've seen starting about January 2023, and we've seen that date in a number of places where we see this employment coming back and people coming back to the office. I don't know if it's the calendar date for people just felt like, okay, the pandemic's over and we can start going back to work, but that's where we saw this increase back up towards about the 8,000 in the area working. And the thing to remember, and I included the annual visits on the right, because remember, each one of those employees, they're coming 5 days a week or however many times. That's a certain amount of visits coming to the downtown. So that's about 400 visits by employees to your downtown. Your downtown overall gets 2.9 million customer visits in a year. So this is another 15% worth of visits that are potential customers, your employees that you have here on multiple days a week. And so those opportunities to convert them into more and more into customers of your other businesses is a strong opportunity for downtown. When you talk about those 2.9 million customers, this goes back to 2019. So you see the trends with the pandemic. So it was about that year recovering and getting people back. And then you've had steady visitation, 50 to 60,000 visitors per week, pretty much going back to 2021 coming out of the pandemic into downtown. Your downtown visitors, you have strong loyalty. And on the chart on the right, this is how many times in a 12-month period they come. So of those 2.9 million visits, the bar on the far right, almost 900,000 of those 2.9 million visits, so almost a third, are by people who visit downtown at least 30 times in a 12-month period. So that's strong repeat customer loyalty that you have, again, of these people who find this connection. I think some of what's pushing that up is more and more of the engagement by the residents that have moved into the surrounding area in these towers. But you do have another 520,000 so about maybe a seventh of those visits that are people who only visited one time in the last 12 months. So just converting them into visiting 2 times can be a significant increase in customer base for your existing businesses, just converting them into a repeat customer from a one-time. How long they stay? So lots of variation here. You can see, there's a quarter of them stay 2.5 hours or more. And in looking at that, that seems to be more in the evening and nighttime. But you have people who come for short visits under 30 minutes, but your median is 87 minutes is the median amount of time that people are in the downtown. And then the weekends, Friday and Saturdays are, still generating a lot more of the foot traffic than the weekdays. I put this on a separate slide to show you kind of what's changed from last year to this year in daytime and nighttime. So the red line shows you the levels from last year of the share that each hour in the day had of visits. The blue line is this year. And so if the blue is, you're going to get incremental changes here. It's not something
Evan,
that's going to...
Forgive me for interrupting, but all of the data in terms of time of day, day of the week, is this all based on credit card transaction data or
This is cell phone location data.
cell phone location? Okay,
Right.
thank you.
It's a system that was specifically developed for retailers and shopping centers to be able to track customer movement.
Okay.
And so if when you have the blue line appear above the red line, that indicates that that hour of the day gained market share in terms of the overall visits coming to downtown. And if the blue line is below, then that hour lost market share. So we see these incremental increases in some of the daytime hours as a share of the total. So it's going the right direction as was discussed and talked about last year. It's not something that you're going to see a big wholesale change to that because your business mix is what's driving that, and it's that incremental turnover in the business mix. But things like the food hall that's opening tomorrow is something that can help that. Things that generate employee visits and keep the employees. The conversations about other uses maybe being allowed on the Hollywood Boulevard, similar to, and I think what you'll see reinforces that is when we look at the daytime versus nighttime on Harrison, where you have a broader range of uses allowed, and you have more of a balance between daytime and nighttime. So those are all things that can help, again, with that, getting some equilibrium into that. You'll see when we get to the Broadwalk, there's much more daytime-nighttime balance when we get out there. And then home distance for your visitors. So 42% of your customers live within 5 miles. That's up from about 38% last year. And so it reinforces that position that you have in your own marketplace, in your primary market, that more of your visitors are coming from there and not seeking things outside, which is a trend we saw coming out of the pandemic. People just wanted to get out, and they weren't coming to the normal places they historically had come. So we're seeing some of that coming back, and the same with even within a 30-mile radius. Last year it was 73%. Now it's 80%. But you still have the same. You've not lost that about 18% of your visitors who live more than 250 miles away. So your true visitors to South Florida. So you've still been able to maintain some of that as well. So when we look at the hours, we broke the blocks out like this to look at them. In this case, we added the foot traffic information we just went through does not include the retail on the north side of Young Circle, where the Publix and the bottom of those residential buildings. But for looking at the hours of the day, we did include that because we wanted to understand those trends. When we do this next year, we will split what you see in the lower right, the 1800. We will split those two blocks because we'll have a full year's worth of data. We can then look at 1818 and see the differences between it and what's happening on the south side of Harrison. This is a busy chart. It's not intended to be read, but what we did is you can kind of quickly look, and we've got a better version of this later. You can see the bar charts between morning, afternoon, evening, and late night. And just sort of at a glance, you can even get a sense of what is dominant where. So you can see the one I would highlight is on the lower right, the 2000 block of Harrison Street. You see some good equilibrium between daytime, afternoon, and evening. Whereas if you look at, I guess, what we call the Twin Peaks block, you see heavy evening utilization there. So we went to look at just what's the density of where the daytime visits are happening. And so here you can kind of see that scale. And you see in the daytime, obviously, up on the north side, with Publix and everything there. But you see the really strong visitation that you have on Harrison in especially the 18 and the 1900 blocks. But even there, when we overlay nighttime utilization, you see just still how in those that look like that still have good daytime utilization, you still see kind of where the nighttime visitation is still dominant. And then you see those couple of blocks, those places where you have more and better daytime. So at the end of the day, this is what is the dominant part of the day. And in this case, we didn't do all four. This was just daytime or nighttime. So morning and afternoon would be daytime, and nighttime, evening and late night would be the nighttime piece. And here's just another way you get an idea of the differences in the distribution of the visits in each block. So this is things that your team can take and kind of understand those different dynamics with each block as you're just implementing your different activities throughout the year. So then we looked at the Broad Walk. You see the drop with COVID, but you had a very quick recovery because you had this great outdoor space for people to go, and you did things expanding, the space for restaurants to expand. And it's one of the quickest that we see in any place that we work in terms of getting back, as you can see, into a very normal, stable pattern of visitation. And this is just to the Broadwalk. This is not the beach. It is the Broadwalk and the businesses that are along the Broadwalk that we're specifically looking at. Obviously your loyalty here is not going to be as high because you have a much wider marketplace and you have a much broader geography that you're drawing from, not just regionally, but also nationally and with tourists. And so that brings you to a lower repeat customer. So your downtown average number of times they come in a year is about 4.3 times. Obviously you have that third of people who come more than 30. Here, the average visit in a year to the Broadwalk itself is 1.89 times in a year.
Kevin, do you have a total visitation for
Total visitation is 2.3 million to the Broadwalk itself. Just to give you a little perspective, so downtown visitation is 2.9 million, to the Broadwalk itself, 2.3 million.
That sounds off, like really off.
Remember, that's just...
At least from a layperson's view on the ground.
So what it's not going to capture, it's what we're trying to find is just the people who visit the Broadwalk and not the beach. And so if you're crossing the Broadwalk, if you're not staying on the Broadwalk for more than 7 minutes and you're going to the beach, we're not capturing here.
Really?
We're filtering those out.
And
So because we
So
really...
does that same data set have a cell phone location that includes the Sandy Beach for the sake of just getting a statistic on total visitation?
We can run that. We can certainly run that and give you the idea of, you've got 2.3 million on the Broadwalk, but you've got 5.9 million out on the
Yeah,
Sandy
it'd be
Beach.
great to have that.
Sure. Yeah, we can. That's easy enough to geofence and run, and
Board
we'll send that to
member-
George
Board
so
member
he can
Shuham, go
forward it
ahead.
over.
I just wanted to confirm that the 2.3 on the Broadwalk includes people that actually live there on the Broadwalk?
It does not.
Oh.
It includes only visitors. There's a filter we have in here where we can filter for residents and their activities and trends, but this one would be for the actual visitor. Now, let me rephrase. It's not going to capture them when they're in their house, but if they're leaving their house and they're visiting restaurants or businesses somewhere along the Broadwalk, then they would be captured as a visitor.
Okay, that's what I
Right,
meant. Thanks.
right. Yep. And we can run that.
And just so you're aware, my interest is in total, total, let's just call it visits on the beach, and that would include residents as well. So in terms of people on the beach, if you can generate that without a filter, then I wonder what the total number is.
We can do that because even in the beach, if they're not in what's been kind of identified as their residence, the place that they're spending the night and all of that, if they're in another place within that geofence, they're going to be picked up as a visitor. Yep. For some perspective, in these numbers though, Dania Point is 6.7 million visits in a year. Oakwood is 7.2 million visits in a year to both the north and south parts of Oakwood. So downtown's 2.9 million.
Is that from a shopping, the disparity is one is a shopping destination where people constantly go to buy things all day, and the other is more of a leisure recreation, right?
That's right. And then also and down Sheridan Plaza, the big shopping center on the north side on Sheridan, it's 5.9 million visits. I mean, it's almost as many as Dania Point.
Grocery stores. Yeah.
And so it's there. It itself is a significant generator of foot traffic.
We all need to eat every day, right? Go
Absolutely.
shopping for groceries.
Yep. Well, that's an interesting one because it really is. It's a mall, but it really functions as a town center, as a downtown for that part of your city.
Yeah.
It really has. I mean, we always think of places, butcher, baker, candlestick maker. It really serves almost all the needs that a neighborhood could have. Yep. The durations, the median here for the Broadwalk itself, again, it'll be interesting to see what the median dwell time is when we add the beach and see the Sandy Beach. But on the Broadwalk and its businesses itself, it's 70 minutes is the median stay. So a little less time than you have in downtown. But some of that may be, some of those are beach visitors, and especially some of these quicker, maybe 30 minutes and less. Maybe people also going to the beach, but they're stopping for a bite. They're stopping at a shop to grab sunscreen or something like that. So figuring out that interrelation between how many beach visitors you have and how much business are your businesses getting from them could be an interesting point.
Thank you.
So if somebody comes just to go to the beach, parks and walks to the beach, that's not in the statistic?
Correct.
Okay, so they have to stop for how much time on the Broadwalk?
They have to do, actually, we filtered, I said 7 minutes, this was filtered for 10 minutes.
Okay, so someone has to actually stop on the Broadwalk or walk on the Broadwalk for 10 minutes?
Right.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Days of the week, obviously weekends, anytime we look at a beachfront place, we see this in Miami Beach, we see this in a lot of places, we're going to have a strong weekend visitation.
Because I'm just thinking as a beach goer, you go, I walk, I set up at the beach, and then I'll walk and get a slice of pizza, then I won't be included in that data of a Broadwalk visitor. So I don't know if maybe there's a...
If it takes you
some
more
way-
than 10 minutes to do that, you will. But what'll be interesting, when we run the beach, we can also, one of the things it'll tell us is what are their favorite places. It'll tell us where did they stop, where's the last place they stopped before they got to the beach, and where's the first place they stopped when they get off the sandy beach. And that's where we'll start seeing which businesses they visit. So even if they're not on the Broadwalk for the 10-minute minimum to be captured there, when we run the beach, they will be captured because we'll be able to see what are those favorite places, those different places they stop.
Gotcha. Probably a better indicator to get the people on the beach.
Total
Is it-
visits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we'll go ahead and run that and send that to George and Lisa so they can get that shared with you.
Okay, thanks.
The home distance here, so about 25% of your visitor base to the Broadwalk it's a large market. 25% are coming from or live within 10 miles. Another 25% live between 10 and 30 miles. And then about 43% of your Broadwalk visitors are tourists, live more than 250 miles away. So it'll be interesting to see, to lay the beach visitor trade area line and compare that with this one and see where there's similarities and where there's differences in terms of who's going to the beach versus just the Broadwalk and where are they coming from. Another thing we looked at that you asked us to look at last time was cross-utilization between the two, between downtown and the Broadwalk. And we've seen positive increases in all of the factors here. Last year, we looked at both on the same day that they visited both, and then we looked at did they visit both within a 6-month period. So last year on the same day, the downtown visitors going also to the Broadwalk was 2.3%, and that's just over 4% this year. So it's been a nice increase in foot traffic that direction. Broadwalk visitors who also came downtown also increased, but not to the level that the other direction went. And then even within 6 months, the downtown visitors, 20% were also visiting the Broadwalk within a 6-month period. That's up to 25%. And then a slight increase in the Broadwalk visitors who came downtown. And I think what's driving that, it's much stronger growth in terms of downtown visitors also going out to the beach, out to the Broadwalk, compared to folks that are already out there coming back to downtown. I think that some of that's is probably driven by the hotels and the visitor market, who that's just really what they're looking for, and they're not necessarily making off the beach. They're making it to other regional destinations. And so more awareness and engagement of what downtown has to offer to that market is something that might be something that can help that trend. But it is, again, sort of the two things that from last year, looking at from last year to this year is what's that daytime, nighttime balance in downtown? And we see, those incremental positive trends there. And then what's that awareness and cross-visitation between the Broadwalk and downtown, and we see the positives there. And with that, that is my final slide.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin. Well, I appreciate the insights here. I know that we, as a board, have discussed the tenancy mix downtown, and we had discussed and asked the Department of Planning, I see Andrea here, to look at the downtown floor uses. Andrea, can you give us a little bit of an update? I don't want to put you on the spot, but let's see where we are with that. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
And if you have any insights on that analysis as of yet.
No, not yet. We're working on putting something together to bring to planning board. Our goal is to work with the CRA to make sure that we're incorporating what their ask truly is with regards to the office on the ground floor on Hollywood Boulevard, Harrison Street. And we're shooting for our July meeting for planning board,
Good.
and then it would come to the commission thereafter. That's our tentative schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Kevin, if you could come up back into the mic, please.
And if any of the board members have any thoughts, George and I would be happy to meet with you if you want to share them as we put the item together.
Okay, great. Well, Kevin, so, and I think you might be aware, we have, long ago, the city had wanted to promote evening uses of downtown, and didn't want, dark, service businesses that aren't open at night to have lights off at night to basically injure the downtown nighttime experience. That was the look that the city had, 15, 20 years ago when this was put in. And today we now have a very active, nighttime, and we feel like maybe the balance ought to also complement, daytime uses so that, downtown dwellers and visitors would have, tenants and businesses that they would want to visit during the day, which would drive the traffic. People are coming to downtown because they need to buy something, do something with a business, and not necessarily only take a stroll.
Right.
So with us looking, and with Andrea's comment to the CRA, with insights in terms of which uses, obviously there's an economic issue here in terms of what are the business uses that ought to be most ideal for a downtown environment like this. That's a classic downtown, and it also serves neighborhood needs, and we're going to have, of course, more people living at the doorstep of downtown. And so what are those uses that are the Sheridan Plaza type day-to-day uses that create so much activity because they provide, as you said, the Sheridan Plaza, what people need. I want to make sure we don't miss the mark on the selection of uses that do drive daytime and serve that neighborhood, day-to-day utility. And so I don't think it's any much of a secret because, retail as a whole, office as a whole, service businesses as a whole, if we lay it all as an opportunity, then that could bring any of the day-to-day, tenants that would serve a community on a day-to-day basis to the downtown. But if there's a way to more precisely choreograph that as the common area owner and the entity that can determine the product mix, the tenant mix, then while not wanting to be restrictive at all, I want to know if we can more precisely target things if it makes sense for us to do so. We can't necessarily, we don't control the property. It's all privately owned by different landlords, but through our zoning, we could certainly encourage and require those types of uses if it makes sense to us to try to, hold out for that ideal as opposed to opening the whole mix of retail, office, service, et cetera. So, and George and Andrea, so if there is a way to be informed by the economic opportunity based on the retail analysis here of the retail mall, sort of shopping center type perspective, we have a shopping center here basically. And so we want to make sure that it has the proper mix so that it's a successful shopping center and one that's, useful for the people who live there and also everyone in Hollywood.
Right. And to that, I've probably said this to you before, downtowns are malls with ownership problems. Yep. That's what they are. That's who you're competing with. Mm-hmm. And you're at a disadvantage because your competition is able to curate exactly the mix that they want, create the flow between those businesses and destinations exactly how they want it. And so that's where your challenge comes in. One of the things that you can do, and obviously you don't control what they lease to as long as they are permitted uses, but another thing we can do is take this data and work with and present that. We presented to the Downtown Owners Association last year this data so they can see here's where some opportunities are. So one thing we can work with George and planning everybody on is we can go deeper into this data. I can tell you that think about your residents, and you have more residents coming online and you saw those trends. They're coming and they're going to your restaurants and your nightlife and your leisure and Young Circle Park and those activities. They're going elsewhere for their personal services. They're going elsewhere for their salons and their spas. That's one that pops really high when we look at other places they go that they're going out of market for. They're going elsewhere to work. And so not just an office that they can work on, but how many entrepreneurs live in these buildings that might need and want a space. And what you're developing is that live, work, play concept. You've got to have the place for them to do all of those things. And that comes into exactly this use discussion. But we can work with them to get more granular into where are both your customers and your residents going. So not just where your residents are going to work in those services. We can look at your customers and say, okay, what are they doing outside of downtown? What are the other things they do? And are there some of those specific uses that we see enough density of engagement and patronage to those businesses that it could be a good opportunity for an entrepreneur, maybe that lives in radius, to open that sort of business downtown.
And I appreciate that, but and before we dish it to Board Member Biederman, I just want to mention, I don't want to spend too much time analyzing the movement of people, like and take a lot of time doing that. I think there's probably a typical industry shopping center mix. If it's a grocery anchored shopping center or whatever, what are the 7 top uses for a successful shopping center type thing, top 10 list, and maybe we also work through that instead of
And what-
overanalyzing the movement of people. But
What-
again,
what-
I'm not the economic expert.
What this
but-
piece would do is it would look at those sort of mixes, but validate the ones that we think would work in this market with your actual customer base and
Gotcha.
and the things that they do.
I got you. All right, Board Member Biederman.
And that's what I was going to touch on, because I think if we don't have enough people living there yet, but maybe next year when we redo this,
Right.
we can analyze where those people are going to. If there's 100 people a day leaving downtown to go to the Whole Foods in Aventura, or they're going to, Home Depot is not a good example because we're not getting a Home Depot in downtown, but if they're going to some type of, or a specific brand of restaurant or a specific brand of store, and there's hundreds of people leaving downtown to do that, we know that we can have economic development or the CRA target those types of places to, occupy a space in downtown. And I think that some of this data is good, and we just got to have more people creating those data marks.
And what we can actually do in this system, and it's one of the new features that they've just added, is what's called a void analysis, where once you decide on these are the types of businesses we want to target, then we can run what's a void analysis, which looks at 3,500 different retailers and matches them to which ones are the best market fit for this location. And so we can look at whether it's a grocery or salon and spa or whatever that category is, or apparel, and to the point that it will give us the good market fit. It'll show us, are they going to cannibalize existing locations or not, which is going to be a consideration of theirs. All of these things, down to giving us the leasing contacts for those retailers. And so once you identify that, it gives you a really good tool to be able to then go engage in with your brokers and your property owners in attracting those specific targets that you identify.
Well, it also helps us determine zoning uses and all that too, not just targeting specific business, but at least we know the mix of the zoning uses.
All right. Any other questions for Mr.